Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the 27th installment of my Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Links Best Deck series. Today I'm going to be showing you a variant of a very popular deck at the moment, Red Eyes. So just a couple of things before the video starts. First of all, I apologise yet again for my lack of uploading. It's really hard for me to get out videos at the moment and will probably continue to be pretty hard to do for the next month. But after that I'll upload once a week, guaranteed. So hopefully you guys can forgive me for my shitty upload schedule for the time being. And the second thing I'd like to say is this deck will not contain any of the new cards, even though the new set literally came out today, as I'm recording this, because obviously I haven't been able to trial them with it, so I don't know if any of them will fit into a Red Eyes deck or not. Now, the last thing I'd like to say is Duel Links is coming to PC later on in the year, so I may consider live streaming at that point, so look out for that. And let's get on with the video. Alright, so the best character for this deck is Seto Kaiba with the skill Beatdown. This turn, the attack of all face-up monsters on your field increases by the number of monsters of level 5 or higher on your field times 300. This skill can be used once per turn. So there are currently 3 skills people use with Red Eyes. There's Balance, Restart, and Beatdown. I prefer Beatdown personally because it gives you an advantage over the other 2 Red Eyes matchups, and Red Eyes currently in the meta is extremely popular, so having a favourable matchup into it was just simply better. It does mean though that your starting hand is a little bit worse than other Red Eyes decks, but the trade-off is obviously you're going to get this big buff to all your monsters. As pretty much every single monster you're trying to special summon will be able to proc this ability, and you'll be able to special summon multiple of them, so having up to 900 plus attack on each of your monsters is going to happen quite a lot. Alright, now getting into the deck list. This deck contains 2 Gozuki, 1 Red Eyes Wyvern, 3 Red Eyes Zombie Dragon, 3 Red Eyes Black Dragon, 1 Tribute to the Doomed, 2 Red Eyes Insight, 2 Cards of the Redstone, 2 Mirror Wall, 2 Red Eyes Spirit, and 2 Champions Vigilance. So the first thing you might notice is there are a lot of 2-ofs in my version of Red Eyes. Simply, this is because 1, I either don't have the cards, which is quite possible, and the second reason is you don't need to have 3 of a card in this kind of a deck. The deck list is literally so the deck is actually so small that not being able to draw at least 1 copy of a card with how quickly this deck cycles through cards is just so unlikely. Like, the main reason Red Eyes is so strong is because of how quickly it cycles and how easily it thins out its own deck. And what I mean by thinning out is it takes out all the crap and just leaves only the strong cards left. So simply, if I just go through the cards now, Gozuki, Red Eyes Spirit, Cards of the Redstone, Red Eyes Insight, all of these cards take cards out of your deck and add them to your hand or graveyard, leaving only good spells and traps and whatever else left in your deck. This means that your hand is normally going to be very consistent, as you're going to rarely draw monster cards that you can't play. You're rarely going to draw your Red Eyes Zombie Dragons and your Red Eyes Black Dragons, and even when you do draw them, you're probably just going to use them with one of your combo pieces such as Cards of the Redstone to draw more cards and send them to the graveyard. So your hand's never really going to be dead with this deck. The good news about this is, pretty much, because of how consistent this deck is and how actively each of the cards work with each other, it doesn't really matter that much if you don't have one copy of one of the cards, or if you only have 2 of a card. You can build a Red Eyes deck no matter what, as long as you have at least 2 Red Eyes Spirits and some Red Eyes synergy somewhere. By the way, this is the deck list I used to get King of Games this season, so if you are looking for a deck to climb, feel free to use this one. Alright, now I'll go through the strategy behind this deck. The strategy with this deck is, I'll go through the basic 3-card combo, but there are several synergies with Red Eyes. All the cards work with each other, nearly all of them combo with each other. So to go through the strategy with just me talking is kind of impossible. Like, I'll talk as best I can, explain the strategy as best I can, but I really recommend with this deck in particular that you watch the gameplays at the end of the video if you don't quite understand, as there are a lot of card synergies with this deck. So the main combo you're going to be using with this deck will be Red Eyes Insight, which will allow you to send 1 Red Eyes monster from either your hand or deck to the graveyard to pull a spell or trap from your deck to your hand. And the trap card you'll pull will always be Red Eyes Spirit. Then you will set Red Eyes Spirit, and on your opponent's turn or whenever you want to, you'll activate Red Eye Spirit and pull the Red Eyes monster you just sent to the graveyard out onto the board. So this combo is very basic. There's not really much for me to say about it or mention about it, other than the card you're mostly going to be pulling from your deck will be Red Eyes Black Dragon, the normal monster, as opposed to the zombie version of Red Eyes, as it combos a lot easier with cards like Champion's Vigilance, and protects your board a lot easier, I mean. So getting the other ones out kind of ruins synergy for later on with the zombie side of the deck, which I'll go through in a second. But you can always pull out the zombie ones if you don't have any normal Red Eyes left. The next part of the strategy I'm going to talk about is Cards of the Redstone. The reason I'm talking about this is because it kind of synergizes with Red Eye Spirit, and it also has some synergy with the zombie side of this deck, as well as a ton of other of the graveyard pulling cards that are included. So what it does is it allows you to send one level 7 Red Eyes monster from your hand to the graveyard to draw 2 cards. You can then send one level 7 Red Eyes monster from your deck to the graveyard, which now you can already see it has drawn you 2 cards and has given you a monster you can proc with your Red Eye Spirit to pull onto the board, and also gives a way for your zombie side of the deck to get a zombie out of your graveyard. Like, the fact this card sends 2 Red Eyes monsters from your hand or deck to the graveyard is already really strong. Plus it has draw 2 cards attached to it, which allows you to cycle through your deck real quick and get to your combo pieces faster. This card is nutty. Obviously the downside to this card in particular, especially with my deck, is a lot of the time you'll find there won't be a Red Eyes monster in your hand because you've already sent them to the graveyard, or you've already summoned them, or something rather. So this card can have a downside when you don't have a Red Eyes monster in your hand, but when you do draw one, normally it becomes a dead card in your hand, as most of the time you want them to be in your deck or in the graveyard. This just gives you an alternative. Alright, now I'm going to move on to the zombie side of this deck, that is Gozuki and Red Eyes Zombie Dragon. So Gozuki has synergy with both Red Eyes Spirit and Red Eyes Zombie Dragon, in that its main ability is during your main phase you can send one zombie type monster from your deck to the graveyard. This now gives you a Red Eyes Zombie Dragon for your Red Eyes Spirit to pull onto the board, and also gives a card for its second ability to work, which its second ability is if Gozuki is destroyed, you can then banish one zombie type monster from your graveyard to special summon one zombie type monster in your hand. Whether that be a Red Eyes Zombie Dragon from your graveyard to summon a Red Eyes Zombie Dragon from your hand, or banishing a Red Eyes Zombie Dragon from your graveyard to summon another Gozuki from your hand. Which I'm not sure why you'd want to do that, but that's basically the only other zombie card you can summon with it. So Gozuki is going to be your other primary way of getting a Red Eyes monster out onto the board, other than Red Eyes Wyvern, which is not part of the strategy of this talk. I'll talk about that card later on in the video when I go through each card individually. Just one of the main things to note about Gozuki is it's not when the card is destroyed, as I said earlier on, it's when the card is sent to the graveyard. So this can also be discarding a card from your hand, or when it's targeted by a spell effect or whatever. As long as it is sent from the field to the graveyard, its ability will then proc. And the last use of Gozuki is with Red Eyes Zombie Dragon itself, as what Red Eyes Zombie Dragon, one of its abilities is, it allows you to tribute summon it by targeting one zombie type monster on the board, and the main monster you're going to be targeting is Gozuki. By the way, at this point, if you're triggered by how I say Gozuki, don't worry, I am too, because I'm pretty sure that's not how you pronounce it. The last part of the strategy I'm going to talk about is the defensive traps. This includes Champion's Vigilance and Mirror Wall. Both these cards are pretty much in here to keep your board safe, as your board is pretty weak to trap cards and spell cards, as just as the ability suggests, basically your deck is just beat down. You're just going to smack your monsters into your opponent's monsters and hope yours are the ones left standing. So having Champion's Vigilance to just lock down your opponent and stop him using any spell or trap to destroy your monsters or even summon any monsters himself is really powerful, as well as having Mirror Wall as a backup to protect your monsters so they don't get destroyed. Alright, so that's pretty much it for the strategy of this deck. There will be gameplay at the end if you don't understand that I highly recommend you watch. For now I'm going to go through each of the monster cards and each of the spells and traps individually to make sure you know exactly what each role they have in the deck is. Alright, so the first monster card I'm going to go through is Gozuki. So basically this card, as I said earlier, is your second primary way of getting a Red Eyes monster out onto the board. Whether it be with Red Eyes Zombie Dragon and its tribute effect, or whether it be using its own ability, which is sending a zombie type monster from your deck to the graveyard during the main phase, and then once it's destroyed, you can banish a zombie type monster, which will be the one you sent, from your graveyard to the banish area to special summon one zombie type monster from your hand, which will be Red Eye Zombie Dragon. And as I said before, this card has a lot of synergy with Red Eye Spirit, as it can also be the monster card you send from your deck to the graveyard, can also be the monster card you target with Red Eye Spirit. The next monster card I'm going to go through in this deck is Red Eye's Wyvern. This card is very powerful, but I only have one of them in my deck list. The reason I only run one of these is it's often hard to get a Red Eyes monster into your graveyard as well as having a Red Eyes Wyvern in your graveyard, as your primary ways to get Red Eyes monsters into your graveyard is going to be using the same cards that you'd have to use to get Red Eyes Wyvern into your graveyard. So basically, only having one Red Eyes Wyvern in your graveyard is good, as opposed to having three of them and no actual strong Red Eyes monster, because you haven't been able to do it. What Red Eyes Wyvern does is, if you did not normal summon or set a monster during your turn, you can banish the card from the graveyard to special summon one Red Eyes monster, except Red Eyes Black Chick, from your graveyard onto the board. So this card is good to normal summon, as when your opponent destroys it, it's then in your graveyard and able to be used to get a bigger, stronger monster out onto the board. It also has some little synergies with the spell cards in this deck, such as Red Eyes Insight and also Tribute to the Doomed, as you can just use it as a card to send to the graveyard to proc their abilities. Alright, so the next card I'm talking about is the Red Eyes Zombie Dragon. Basically, this card is what you're going to use, your second primary Red Eyes monster. It's going to be the one you don't want to target with Red Eyes Spirit unless you have to. You can prefer to use the other Red Eyes for that. This is the one you're going to be using with the zombie synergy with Gozuki. So what it does is, if you have one zombie monster on the board, you can tribute that monster and summon this monster without a second tribute. Its secondary ability is, if your opponent controls a zombie monster and you kill it, you can then summon it, which is kind of an added bonus that this card doesn't really need and rarely uses, but it's kind of nice to have. Now obviously this is a Red Eyes level 7 monster, so it works with all of your Red Eyes cards, all the Red Eyes synergies, hence why it's in the deck, as well as having the zombie synergy with Gozuki. There's not really much more to say about it, just watch the gameplay at the end if you want to see this card in action, as I've already really spoken about how to summon it and whatever else. The next monster I'm going to be talking about is Red Eyes Black Dragon. This is your primary Red Eyes monster you're going to be using. It's the card you're going to be targeting with Red Eyes Spirit. It also has the added advantage of it can be used with Champion's Vigilance and have that added protection, and also a bit of aggression in a way, as you can stop your opponent doing stuff, bit of lockdown. Plus, it's level 7 and works with all Red Eyes synergy cards. Again, there's not really much more to say about it. Basically, this is just a card you're going to be summoning to just win the game. So, without further ado, I'll go through the spells and traps in the deck. Alright, the first spell in this deck I'm going to be going through is Tribute to the Doomed. This is a card most Red Eyes players don't use. I like to just run one of them, as there's a few times when basically you just want to have solid removal, as removal is strong in any card game, whether it be Duel Links, Magic, Hearthstone, whatever. Removal is extremely strong, plus removal also normally comes with a downside, whereas the downside for this isn't really a downside for this deck. What this card does is it allows you to discard one card, then target one monster on the field and destroy it. So you discard one of your Red Eyes monsters to the graveyard, activating all your Red Eyes synergies, plus destroying a monster your opponent controls, which is a powerful effect. So this card makes sense to be in this deck. Whether or not you want to run more than one is kind of up to you. I think you might be a bit overkill if you run more than one then. The next card is Red Eyes Insight. What this card does is allows you to send one Red Eyes monster from your hand or deck to the graveyard, and add one Red Eyes spell trap card from your deck to your hand, except Red Eyes Insight. So like I said before, basically this is your primary combo piece. You activate it and then you're able to summon a Red Eyes onto the board, because you just send your Red Eyes creature to your graveyard, grab your Red Eyes Insight from your deck, place it on the board, activate it, you now have a Red Eyes monster on the board. Fairly simple combo, real easy to use, very powerful. And the last thing to note about it is you can only use one of them per turn, so you can't use it to just get two big powerful monsters out on turn 1. The next card is Cards of the Redstone. Now I've already spoken a lot about this in the strategy, but I'll go through it briefly again. Basically you can send one level 7 Red Eyes monster from your hand to the graveyard and draw 2 cards. You can then send one level 7 Red Eyes monster from your deck to the graveyard. You can, just like Red Eyes Insight, you can only use this once per turn. So not only does this card allow you to send 2 Red Eyes monsters to the graveyard, which activates all your Red Eyes synergies again, but it also allows you to then draw 2 cards, which is very powerful. Drawing cards is very powerful. Cycling is very powerful in any card game, especially in a card game where you only have 20 cards in your deck. The only real downside to this card in the deck is if you don't have a Red Eyes level 7 monster in your hand, it's going to kind of screw you, as you just won't be able to use it. It's going to be a dead card in your hand. But on the other side, if you do have a level 7 monster in your hand, this deck can also get the ball rolling, as the drawing 2 cards as well as sending the Red Eyes to the graveyard activates the Red Eyes synergies and gives you the cards to use with those synergies. So I think the cons are definitely outweighed by the pros in this case. The next card is Mirror Wall. Basically this card is very common, very popular, extremely strong. It's there to protect your big monsters once they're out on the board, as if they are killed once they're out on the board, your game's probably over. It also allows you to protect your Gozuki, as that's a pretty weak monster, and if it is protected, you can then summon your Red Eye Zombie Dragon on top of it, using it as the tribute. But basically its primary use is protecting your big monsters once they're out on the board. The next card is Red Eye Spirit. What this card does is it allows you to target one Red Eyes monster in your graveyard except Red Eyes, Black Trick, and special summon it. This is the card you're going to be targeting with Red Eyes Insight, as well as just playing it generally. It can then grab any Red Eyes monster from your graveyard and add it to the board. This can be used with Gozuki, can be used with any of your cards that send monsters from your hand to the graveyard. Very powerful card, very basic, very self-explanatory. The last card in this deck is Champion's Vigilance. This card is extremely powerful. If you've got one of these out on the board and you're able to activate it, you're going to have a huge advantage. What this does is if it's on the board and you have a level 7 or higher normal monster, which will be your Red Eyes normal dragon, then you can activate it to negate the summon or activation of any card, whether it be spell, trap, monster card. It will negate it. Negating is a very powerful effect in this game. I love negating, it's why I run things like Ryoko Field in my other decks. Basically, it can just lock down your opponent, stop them doing anything. It also gives the advantage of if you have a face down card on the board, your opponent might think it's one of these cards and will just summon anything to try and get you to proc it. So it has added advantage of it being a very, very scary card. Plus, if you actually do have it on the board, it is a very scary card. Your opponent will not be able to do anything once it's there. Obviously, it has the huge downside of it's only able to be used once you have your Red Eyes normal dragon out on the board, hence why I only run 2 of them instead of 3, as you're not always going to be relying on the normal Red Eyes monster to win this game. There's always going to be the zombie half the deck, which has no effect with this card, and this card would be a dead card once you're using the zombie part. Alright guys, that's pretty much it for this video. Thank you guys for watching. Like, subscribe, comment, all those kind of things. I read through all the comments I get on all my videos. I love comments, love interacting with anybody that likes watching whatever I make. Thank you guys for watching again, and I hope to see you in the next one. Oh, and stick around for the gameplay if you want to watch that. There should be about 5 gameplays. Not all of them will be King of Games, as most of them are from my climb to King of Games this season.